Hi there. Is God a maniac? I think this is a question that has been asked many times, not least by atheists such as Stephen Fry. And I think this is where I'm getting the question from a lecture he gave. Um, basically, his thesis is that, you know, Jesus was a nice chap. All right, on this, we're pretty much agreed. A bit of a temper, but on the whole, a nice chap. And he said some very good things in the Beatitudes, and he did a bit of spiritual healing and brought comfort and fed the 5,000 and all this. So, yes, a good chap, but his father, um, the God of Jesus, um, well, if you look at the Old Testament, basically a monotheistic tribal deity that favors only the Jews and brings death and destruction to everybody else, and an exclusivist deity, one might say. Um, and this is the true God of Jesus, and lots of Jews are nice people, good people, creative people, humanitarians. But those that are orthodox, you know, have an orthodox religious outlook, are very far from being tolerant and humanitarian, really. So it's only the Jews that are humanist, atheist, secularist. They're going to be anybody decent, really. And the religion brings out the worst in everybody. So this God inspires the very worst of people. Um, and Jesus is used as a sort of totem, as a sort of club to club people over the head with. So even though historically, the historical Jesus, if there was one, is a nice chap, the things that people do in the name of Jesus are unspeakable and tyrannical and against human rights. And on the basis of this, and the fact that nature is so red in tooth and claw, and everything is about manipulation, exploitation, and predation, that the God, basically, the God, this monotheistic God that's been created by Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, um, is just, why worship such a being? It's supposed to be a God of love, and love is God, as my mother always used to say. But, how can you reconcile nature with God? Of course, I suppose, Christians have been answering criticisms like this for centuries. So they pretty much have an answer to everything. And I suppose the answer to this is that we are living in a fallen age, in a fallen Eden, which came about as a result of the disobedience of Adam and Eve to God. And we wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for their disobedience, their original sin, if you like. And so, that's how things have come to this pretty pass. And it's only through through the sacrifice of Christ on the cross and the work he did on the cross that everything will come right in the end. But as far as humanists and atheists are concerned, their concept of God is very much sort of based on a God that should be good, but in fact isn't good. And how can this be? Disregarding the actual Christian narrative on the subject of why God allows evil to happen, and why is nature so flawed and so full of menace and threat and destructiveness. Um, but insofar as anybody can superficially say, how can you worship a God who has created this world? Then I mean, the answer as far as Gnosticism is concerned is there isn't one God. There are in fact two gods, at least two gods anyway, if not many, many more. But that notwithstanding, there are certainly two gods, and one God is the creator of this world, and I sort of wave my hand sort of vaguely around the room, this world. And in fact, the astral world and right up to the spiritual world itself have created all this. And there's sort of two concepts of this. There's a deist concept that this creator God created everything, and then left, became aloof from his creation, um, and but also partakes of the characteristic of a personal deity who interferes or intervenes rather positively in the lives of his devotees. Um, which is pretty much in Hinduism as well. I mean, to the devotees of Krishna, there is a cornucopia upturned. There is a magic porridge pot available for those who chant Hare Krishna, and never mind the creation of the world, as it were. But be that as it may, there is the demiurge, there's the creator God, the God of this world, the lower world, as one might say. And maybe he created it, or he, she, or it, and then went off, and they left us with the three modes of existence: preservation, creation, and destruction. The adversarial algorithm within everything in the universe, the fact that everything is based on conflict, resolution, conflict, and the idea of scarcity as well. Very big thing about scarcity, because when you think about all the behavior of all sentient beings everywhere, they're all reacting in some way or another to scarcity and its many manifestations. Um, and you could think, why has a God of love created scarcity, for example? Never mind the three modes of existence, or even the adversarial algorithm or adversarial spirit within everything. Um, but so we have this lower God, this demiurge that has created scarcity, from which all other ills arise, and of preservation, creation, and destruction. They play a sort of game with each other. They dance around each other, and one mode slips into the other. And pretty much everything is created with a sort of binary system in mind. There's dark and light, and heat and cold, and there is pro and anti. There is some species sometimes have a good time and sometimes have a bad time. And this is the world of duality in which we exist, which we perceive. Even our perception is one of duality. And yet, with this demiurge, does seem to be also an intervening deity, as I say, who acts positively in regard to his deities, sometimes positively anyway, and sometimes not. God gives and God takes away, an idea. And we have over here on the left hand side, we have the transcendental one, the God of the Gnostics. And this God is aloof from creation. So, I mean, had nothing to do with this world, with these worlds that have been created. And lives in a transcendental realm, but also seems to be a personal intervening deity that can be called upon, or spontaneously helps people through the avatar of the Christ, the angels, the saints, and the mystics, who either give help or healing, or actual knowledge, mystical knowledge, which helps people, and clarification of ethical issues as well, which helps people and communities and societies. But this the transcendental God is the source also is a soul source, to which we will return. So we have here the sort of the sacred sign of Gnosticism, which I came up with. It's kind of like a U shape, where the soul starts off in the higher realms and comes down into the lower realms and goes back up, to be reconciled with God, despite everything that has happened to soul, and all the harm that has been done to us and the harm that we have done, perhaps over countless lifetimes as well, bringing in reincarnation. And yet at the end, all is right, all is restored to how it was, even if we are wiser after the event, as it were. Notice that the transcendental God shares uh, the same characteristic as the demiurge, in that it can be an intervening God, personal God, positive God. I mention this because it's quite important. This, and perhaps the main point of this presentation, is that the demiurge has created copies of the Christ, copies of angels, copies of saints, copies of mystics. These are the agents through which he very kindly, he, she, or it very kindly, magnanimously, throw us little tidbits from the master's table. So the idea of the demiurge is the master, demiurge is the creator God. The demiurge is the God that we must propitiate. And sometimes when the God is in a good mood, we will get good things, but mostly we get bad things. And mostly we get bad things in order to test our faith in the master as well. So it's very much a master-slave relationship. It's a hierarchical relationship with God at the top and we at the bottom, sort of thing, bottom of the totem pole. And this is different really from how the transcendental God works, because all the miracles that are done by Christ, the Holy Spirit, the angels, the mystics and saints, they are to provide us with intimations of immortality, intimations or suggestions of something other than where we are, and other to what we are, really just giving us an idea that we are soul. So all the miracles that Jesus did, the idea is to show us that there is a spiritual world within. It's not the healing is not important in itself. The miracle is not important in itself. It's what the miracle points to, in terms it points to a transcendental God. It points to a return journey which soul is going to make as it goes back to Godhead. Um, and this is the main Gnostic idea, I suppose, really. So, transcendental God, you don't have to propitiate this God. The love is unconditional, and the love is there as a sort of or message in a bottle, as it were. And we are thrown the best in the message. We find these messages in the miracles that happen. We find them in love that occurs in this world as well, and in self-sacrifice that happens, and in idealism, and in responsibility for that idealism as well, and for balanced actions. We find it in all sorts of ways, and these are all pointers to the spiritual source from where we came, um, and to which we are going back. And this is different from the sort of demiurge's idea, which is a sort of like a potentate, that grants boons on one hand and curses with another, and who basically has set up the whole game, so that the banker always wins. That's the first thing, and a game which basically you're going to lose, whatever you do. And also, the demiurge has created agents that seem like they are part of Christ, that seem like they are part of angels, but they're not. That's not to say that there's deception going on, because I think actually a facsimile or a copy is not a deception. It's merely that, the demiurge is trying to be like the transcendental God, is trying to be loving, and trying to be positive, but is hopelessly flawed, really. And indeed, it reflects the. St. Paul said, "It's the good that I would that I do not, and the evil that I would not that I do." And the demiurge seems to follow this. In fact, seems to have this flaw. So, in fact, in many ways, the flaws of the demiurge kind of reflect the flaws in humankind, really. Now, I mean, all this can be taken metaphorically, and perhaps should be taken metaphorically, and is referring to the human condition, and to other existential ideas. And nothing metaphysical is implied, actually, when it's seen in a sort of metaphysical light, when you're looking at the meaning of these words rather than their reality. So it could be that atheists are right, that that there is no life after death, there is no God, there is only a brief um, sort of perception of life, which we have through the central nervous system of our brains, and then when the brain activity ceases, it's all over. Um, and that's not a thought which worries me. It's not a thought which sort of makes me defensive of religion or defensive of metaphysics at all. So I don't have a problem with Stephen Fry, or even Stephen King for that matter, because he's an atheist as well. I don't have a problem with this, and I can see that what Stephen Fry is objecting to mostly is how people take the existence of God, in quotation marks, and the existence of the historical Jesus, if they're Christian, on the other hand, and they link it to their self-identity to such an extent that it becomes like an ego trip, and they link the identity of their country, of their culture, of their language. Everything is linked to belief in deity. And if you don't believe in deity, then you're not a good person, and you're not a person that sees the world through the religionist's eyes. And that I admit, the humanists have a problem with that, and I have a problem with that. But I think most modern Gnostics have a problem with that too. I mean, metaphysics has always been either to be taken metaphorically, or it's to be taken in a sense which is not exactly fundamentalist. Although, again, God is supposed to be the reality of all realities, but it's not a reality that's connected to this world. And of course, having a creator God, having a demiurge, means that you do accept a metaphysics of creation, as it were, that this demiurge is the first cause of this world, of these worlds coming into existence. Um, Whereas, in fact, the transcendental God actually isn't really a source for anything. It's not a source in that sense, in a way, because and also I've explained this using numbers, which I'm very fond of. I mean, there's a number 9 which goes down eventually to 3, which goes down to 1, and the 1 is left. But as far as the transcendental God is concerned, you've got two things: the duality of this world, and they become zero. Um, but this zero isn't a void; it isn't a nothingness. It is a potential for infinite bliss and infinite beingness and infinite consciousness, and a perfection of these things as well. So whereas you have on this side with the demiurge, you have just a one left, which is the demiurge itself, and a one that's imploding in on itself as well. But or perhaps you don't know. And you have a zero on the other, which is the perfection of a sort of mystical state in which and all opposites are reconciled together to create a sort of kind of a potentiality, as it were. But again, all this doesn't cut any ice with your atheists, your secularists, and your humanists and futurists. And why should it? And I still so the answer is God a maniac? I think that this question is only asked by people who want to disprove the existence of God, a God of the Christians or a God of love. But I think that their concept of God needs to be looked at very, very intensely. And I think, perhaps a lot of fundamentalists don't really have a concept of God either. They think that God is America, or they think God is ISIS, or they think God is Saladin, or they think of God as uh, some kind of in a materialistic way, materialistic religion, as some people have called it. And mysticism is generally thinking about different things, to thinking about the actual definition of God, definition of love, definition of reality, for that matter, in an intense way, perhaps in a philosophical way sometimes, and in a mystical way in other times. And of course, Gnostics also claim that they have the answer through direct revelation of the truth. As I said before, they have seen round the final bend in the river, and they're not speculating anymore because they know the answer to what is around the corner, around the bend, as it were. So you have that side of Gnosticism as well. Um, I think that this whole I find Gnosticism very elegant. You see, the thing about these two gods, it does answer the question. How does a God of love um, create so much misery and death and pain and suffering? And I mean, the demiurge has his or her or its own definition of love, without a doubt, which isn't Stephen Fry's definition of love, for sure. It's nothing to do with what he might think. So it all boils back down to what we define the words as. And the words are very important. So we have to spend most of our time defining words, defining what we actually mean by the buzzwords that are used by religionists and atheists, for that matter. And we also have to look very carefully what we mean by God and what we mean by Jesus and what we mean by historical Jesus and the Christ Spirit, the Holy Spirit. And these things, should occupy our consciousness quite a bit of the time, really. And I think the insights that you may get, which okay, maybe just speculation, uh, but the insights that you get are a source of inspiration in life, and perhaps even a source of ethics, which is another thing that Stephen Fry wants to also worries about ethical living, which we all do, and how best to manage scarce resources so that everybody has a fair portion of them. And one might sort of talk about socialism, for example, as being one method of making sure everybody does get a fair portion of the scarce resources that this earth is offering. And there's no doubt about it that, instead of creating lots of waste, if we recycle that waste, we can actually make the resources of the planet sort of go further, and that will be also a way out of scarcity. But at the end of the day, scarcity does seem to be written in to the algorithm. However, idealistically, we try and alter that algorithm. Perhaps we never will be able to. But futurists say we will actually be able to. One day we will have no scarcity right now on this planet as human beings as we are. and we don't have to wait to be reconciled with God or anything like that. We will have it. We will be gods, but we're not yet. We're not there yet. And I think that the demiurge could be offering you that as a future, in order to get you to buy into the demiurge's game, like offering people futures in a stock market, to keep you there, to keep you trading. But in fact, the transcendental God is aloof from all this, and if you have any sense, you will realize that soul awareness will take you away from all this game that we're playing, that we're part of, this matrix that we are stuck in for the moment, anyway.